There is a kind of hunger that has no name in childhood. It does not announce itself. It does not arrive with a label or a diagnosis. It settles quietly into the body of a small child who reaches out, not for food or warmth, but for something far more delicate. A look that says, "You matter." A voice that says, "You are safe." A presence that holds them without condition. When that goes unanswered, not once, but consistently, across the long and formative years of growing up, something in that child begins to reorganize. Not loudly, not dramatically, quietly, the way a river reroutes itself around a stone that was placed in its path long ago. Emotional reassurance is not a luxury. It is not something reserved for sensitive children or indulgent parenting. Research in developmental psychology has consistently demonstrated that emotional validation in childhood is a foundational need, as essential to psychological health as food is to the body. When a caregiver acknowledges a child's emotional experience, they are doing something profound. They are teaching that child that their inner world is real, that their feelings have value, that they deserve to be met by another human being with gentleness and care. When that does not happen, the child does not simply move on, they adapt. And that adaptation follows them into adulthood in ways that can take a lifetime to understand. If this perspective resonates, you can support the video by liking it. The nervous system of a child is not yet fully formed. It depends on the nervous system of a caregiver to help it regulate. This is called co-regulation, a term grounded in neuroscience and attachment research. When a parent soothes a distressed child, they are not simply calming a mood. They are helping the child's brain learn how to return to a state of balance. Over thousands of repetitions, this becomes internalized. The child learns, biologically, what safety feels like. But when emotional reassurance is absent, when distress is dismissed, minimized, or met with silence, the child's nervous system must find another way. It learns to manage alone. It learns that showing feelings brings no relief, and so it learns to hide them. That hiding becomes a kind of expertise. Children who grow up without emotional reassurance often become extraordinarily skilled at reading rooms, predicting moods, performing composure they do not feel. Psychologists describe this pattern as emotional suppression, and studies have linked chronic emotional suppression to increased rates of anxiety, depression, and difficulties in forming secure attachments later in life. The child who learned to be small, who learned to need nothing, who learned that their emotions were inconvenient, carries those lessons into every relationship they will ever have. Comment unseen if this describes your experience. In adulthood, the effects are woven into the ordinary fabric of daily life. They show up in the way a person struggles to ask for help, not because they are proud, but because something old and wordless in them believes that needing things leads to disappointment. They show up in the reflexive apology for taking up space, in the compulsion to be useful so that love feels justified, in the exhaustion of giving endlessly while quietly starving for someone to ask how they are doing and mean it. Research on attachment theory, first developed by John Bowlby and later expanded by Mary Ainsworth, helps explain these patterns. Children who do not receive consistent emotional attunement from caregivers often develop what is called insecure attachment. This can manifest as anxious attachment, where the adult perpetually fears abandonment and seeks constant reassurance. Or it can manifest as avoidant attachment, where the adult keeps emotional distance as a form of protection. convinced that closeness eventually leads to pain. Both are adaptations born from the same root, a childhood where emotions were not safely received. Type YES if this helped you understand something about yourself. There is something particularly quiet about this kind of wound. It leaves no visible mark. There is often no single event to point to, no dramatic rupture, no obvious neglect in the conventional sense. Many who grew up without emotional reassurance had parents who provided materially, who worked hard, who did their best within the limits of what they had been taught. And yet the absence of emotional attunement, even in otherwise stable homes, can leave a deep imprint. Psychologists sometimes call this emotional neglect, and it is perhaps the most invisible form of childhood deprivation, precisely because nothing seems to have happened. The harm is not in what was done, it is in what was never offered. The body remembers. This is not speculation. Research in the field of psychosomatic medicine has documented connections between unprocessed emotional experiences and physical health outcomes. Adults who report emotionally dismissive childhoods show higher rates of chronic stress responses, difficulties with emotional regulation, and in some studies, measurable differences in how their bodies respond to threat. The child who learned to swallow feelings did not simply forget them. The body held what the mind was not allowed to express. If someone you know might benefit from this, feel free to share it. And yet, there is something quietly remarkable about those who grew up this way. The capacity for self-sufficiency they developed, while born of necessity, is genuine. The empathy they carry, often forged from years of watching others carefully and learning to sense the emotional temperature of a room, is real. The depth with which they feel, even when they have spent a lifetime trying not to, is extraordinary. These qualities do not erase the difficulty, but they are not nothing. Understanding the origins of these patterns is itself a form of relief. When an adult can trace their difficulty with vulnerability back to a nervous system that learned early that vulnerability was unsafe, something shifts, not completely, not immediately, but the behavior begins to make sense in a new way. It is no longer a character flaw. It is an intelligent adaptation to an environment that could not hold them. Recognizing that distinction between who you are and what you learned in order to survive is where something new can begin to take root. If this gave you clarity, comment "whole" below. The longing for emotional reassurance does not disappear in adulthood simply because it went unmet in childhood. It persists. It surfaces in the hope that someone will notice without being asked. In the ache that appears when a partner says the right thing and somehow it still does not reach the place that needs it most. In the moments of unexpected grief over something small that are not really about the small thing at all. That longing is not weakness. It is the most human thing there is. The need to be known, to be held in language and in presence, to have someone look at the fullness of you and not turn away. If this video helped you understand something about the long, quiet reach of emotional reassurance and what it means to have grown up without it, please like it. It helps more people find their way to these conversations. And if there is something here that stays with you, something that named a feeling you have carried without words, leave it in the comments below. What does it feel like to finally see this clearly? Your reflection might be exactly what someone else needs to read today. And if you want to keep exploring the hidden architecture of human psychology, the patterns we carry, the wounds we do not see, and the quiet resilience that lives inside all of them, consider subscribing to Unnoticed Human because some of the most important things about being a person are the ones nobody talks about.